The text arrived at exactly 11:17 on a Tuesday night. I was sitting in my dimly lit carport down in Clear Lake, elbows deep in the carburetor of a 1974 Ford pickup I'd been restoring for 3 years without any real sense of urgency. The Gulf Coast heat still hung heavy in the air, thick and unmoving, the way only Houston summers managed to be. My hands were coated in black grease, a familiar, comfortable second skin. The neighbor's lawn, sprinkler, ticked methodically in the distance, a quiet rhythm against the silent backdrop of the neighborhood. To the rest of the world, and especially to my son-in-law Marcus, I was just Gerald. I was a 65-year-old widower, a blue-collar nobody who fixed leaky pipes, busted engines, and cracked drywall for a few extra bucks. A simple, uneducated handyman who didn't understand the complexities of the modern corporate world. A man who wore heavy work boots and faded flannel shirts. But Marcus didn't know the truth. He didn't know that before I bought this quiet, unassuming house by the water, I spent 22 years in special operations. He didn't know about the things I'd seen, the men I'd hunted, or the highly specific set of skills I had acquired in places that didn't exist on standard military maps. I traded my tactical rifle for a wrench a long time ago because I wanted peace. I wanted to be a grandfather. I wanted to build things instead of tearing them down. My phone buzzed on the workbench, cutting through the silence. I wiped my hands on a dirty rag, expecting a spam call or a reminder about an upcoming doctor's appointment. Instead, it was a message from my daughter, Simone. 2 words and a live location pin, blue star. I remember the exact moment my hands went completely still. I wasn't shaking. I was just profoundly, terrifyingly still. It was the kind of absolute stillness that happens when your nervous system understands something. Your brain hasn't fully processed yet. Simone hadn't used those 2 words since she was 13 years old. We created the Blue Star Code the winter after her mother passed away. My wife, Rhonda, died from a sudden stroke at 44. There was no warning, no goodbye. Simone was just a kid, working so hard to seem tougher than she felt, holding back tears to protect me. One evening, after the funeral, she climbed onto the bathroom counter to watch me shave, just like she did when she was a toddler. She looked at me with red, swollen eyes and asked, "Dad, what if someday I'm really scared? And I can't find the right words to tell you." So we built the code between us. Blue Star. It meant one thing, and one thing only. Don't ask questions. Don't hesitate. Just come, and come ready for war. She had never used it, not once in 22 years. Until tonight, every quiet, patient part of me went entirely dark. The retired, friendly handyman vanished. The operator woke up. I didn't bother changing my grease-stained shirt. I grabbed my keys, but before I started the truck, I made one phone call. I called Ray Delgado. Ray did 26 years with Houston PD, mostly in undercover narcotics and tactical units, before he retired to run a private security consulting firm. He's one of those men who always looks perpetually half asleep, as if the world bores him, until something actually needs doing. Then, he becomes the most dangerous, clear-thinking person in any room. He answered. On the 3rd ring, he sounded groggy, the exhaustion of a late night weighing on his voice. "Ray," I said, my voice eerily calm and devoid of emotion. She used the code. The line went dead silent. The sleep vanished entirely from his breathing. "Address," he demanded. There were no questions. There was no hesitation. "Her place in Katy. I'm leaving now. I'll meet you at the subdivision entrance," Ray said, and the line went dead. I threw the old Ford into reverse and tore out of the driveway, the tires screeching against the wet pavement. Rain was starting to fall, blowing sideways across the Katy freeway the way it does during a Gulf Coast squall. It was the kind of blinding rain that makes highway lanes feel like mere suggestions. The radio played old Tejano music through one blown speaker, but I didn't hear a single note of it. My mind was a vault unlocking, aggressively cataloging every small, terrible detail I had willfully ignored for the past 6 years in the name of keeping the peace. I thought about Simone wearing long-sleeved sweaters at our Easter brunch when it was 90 degrees outside. I thought about the way she constantly apologized for minor things that weren't her fault, flinching when someone dropped a fork. I thought about my 6-year-old granddaughter, Gracie, who would go perfectly, unnaturally silent the moment Marcus walked into a room. Like a child who had learned very early on that stillness was far safer than sound. I thought about last Thanksgiving. We were sitting at my dining table, surrounded by family. Marcus had taken a bite of Simone's green bean casserole, chewed slowly, and placed his fork down with a loud, theatrical sigh. He didn't yell. Men like Marcus don't yell in public. They prefer psychological warfare. Instead, he used that quiet, condescending tone designed to make the entire room understand that you are beneath them. "Simone, darling," Marcus had smirked, adjusting his expensive silk tie. "I thought we talked about following simple instructions. This is practically inedible. It's really not that difficult. But then again, look at your genetics." He had shot a side-eye at my worn-out work boots resting near the door. "I suppose excellence isn't exactly a family trait." Simone had laughed it off immediately, her hands trembling violently as she quickly cleared the plates. "I'm so sorry, Marcus. I'll do better next time." I had sat there, gripping my glass of iced tea so hard the glass nearly shattered in my hand. I had bitten my tongue. I told myself it wasn't my place to interfere in a marriage. I told myself that keeping the peace was the same thing as keeping my daughter safe. I was a fool. Keeping the peace just gives a monster a quiet room to operate in. I reached the Katy subdivision just before midnight. Ray was already parked near the entrance in his gray F-150. As I pulled up, he climbed out of his truck and got into my cab without a single word. He was wearing a dark windbreaker, his face an unreadable mask of cold stone. We drove the last half-mile in heavy silence, rolling past identical beige houses with decorative stone accents and perfectly manicured lawns. It was the kind of neighborhood that looks expensive and successful from a distance, but feels utterly hollow and sterile up close. Marcus loved places like this. He loved the illusion of perfection. Simone's house sat at the end of a long cul-de-sac. Her porch light was burning like a solitary lighthouse in the driving rain. I killed my headlights and let the truck roll to a silent stop by the curb. We sat there for a fraction of a second. Even through the heavy rain drumming against the windshield, we heard it, a loud crash, followed by a man shouting. Ray looked at me, his eyes dead flat. "You want me to call it in to HPD?" "Not yet," I said. My eyes were already scanning the property, shifting into a tactical assessment out of pure muscle memory. The kitchen window was lit, a sickly yellow. Gracie's little pink bicycle was tipped over near the garage door. Simone's sedan was parked at an odd angle in the driveway, completely blocked in by Marcus's SUV, as if she had tried to leave but was physically prevented. Then, Marcus's voice sliced clean through the walls in the rain. "You think your pathetic, grease-monkey father can fix this for you? He can't even fix his own life." I didn't wait for another word. I opened the door of the truck. I don't remember crossing the wet lawn. I just remember the rain soaking through my shirt and Ray matching my stride perfectly, stepping silently in my blind spot. Somewhere deep inside my chest, a heavy iron door quietly closed on the patient, forgiving grandfather I had been trying to be. For years, I had been respectful. I had tolerated Marcus's arrogant smirks. I had introduced him to wealthy clients whose houses I maintained, helping him land corporate accounts. He never would have gotten on his own. I had played the role of the dumb handyman perfectly. But the handyman was gone, and the man walking up to that door was someone Marcus Hale was entirely unprepared for. Halfway up the concrete walk, another crash echoed from inside the house. Glass shattering violently against a wall. Then came the sound that stopped my heart cold. Gracie was crying. That specific trapped, whimpering children make when they've learned that making too much noise brings the monster right to them. I pushed the heavy oak door wide open. The smell hit me first. High-end bourbon, burnt food, and the sharp metallic tang of blood. Simone was backed into a corner, one arm pressed tightly across her ribs, her lower lip split and actively bleeding. Gracie was huddled on the floor, behind her mother's legs, trembling violently. Marcus Hale stood near the kitchen island, holding a crystal rocks glass. When he saw me, his expression shifted from raging aggression to calculated, mocking surprise. Gerald, Marcus said quickly, spreading his hands. This isn't what it looks like. Your daughter is just being hysterical again, Grandpa. Gracie screamed, breaking away from her mother. I crouched down, and she hit my chest like a freight train, shaking with a mountain of fear. I held her tight, then passed her gently to Ray, who had smoothly stepped into the house behind me. Hey there, little one, Ray whispered. Help me find something to drink in that kitchen. Gracie nodded, gripping his hand. Marcus let out an ugly laugh. You can't just barge into my house, Gerald. Couples argue. She threw a plate at me first. He shifted his weight toward Simone, and I watched her shoulders contract in a small, reflexive flinch. Fear has a posture. My daughter had it. I'm taking Simone and Gracie with me tonight, I said, my voice terrifyingly calm. Marcus's corporate mask vanished, replaced by the entitled bully. Like hell you are, he spat, lunging forward to grab Simone's arm. That was his fatal mistake. I moved faster than his eyes could track, stepping inside his guard. My left hand clamped around his wrist, like a vice, while my right hand dug directly into the brachial plexus pressure point, tucked deep under his collarbone. I applied precisely 30% of the force required to paralyze the nerve bundle. Marcus dropped his glass. His knees buckled instantly, as agonizing pain short-circuited his nervous system. He choked on a scream, scrambling uselessly against the floor as his legs gave out. I leaned in, inches from his panicked eyes. Take your hands off my daughter, I whispered. I held the grip for 3 seconds, letting him feel my absolute physical dominance, then released him. Marcus collapsed, gasping for air. He had expected to push around a frail handyman. He had collided with a wall of hardened steel. What are you going to do, old man? He rasped, scrambling backward. Call the cops. It's my word against hers. Ray's voice floated out from the kitchen. Already did. When the deputies arrived, Marcus performed his terrifying transformation, playing the exhausted husband dealing with an erratic wife. Simone, terrified of the threat in his eyes, whispered that they both got upset. Without her cooperation, there would be no arrest tonight. As Simone packed 2 small bags, Marcus followed her, his voice dripping with venom. You're going to regret this. Who's going to take care of you? Him? A broke handyman? We walked out into the rain. The drive back to Clear Lake was quiet. After Gracie fell asleep on my couch, Simone stared blankly at the coffee maker. Ray stopped on the front porch before leaving. This didn't start tonight, Ray said quietly. I'll start pulling public records in the morning. Use the old networks, I replied, my voice dropping. I want to know every breath that arrogant bastard takes. At 4:15 a.m., Simone sat across from me in the dark kitchen. Dad, she whispered, her voice cracking, do you think less of me for staying? The dam broke, and she wept. Over 2 hours, the truth spilled out. Marcus controlled every bank account, checked her phone, and picked brutal arguments before family events, so she would appear unstable. He hit me the first time when Gracie was 18 months old. Something feral broke open inside my chest. I walked into the garage and drove my fist into a metal storage cabinet, caving the steel inward. The time for being the polite handyman was finished. The following afternoon, Ray walked into my dining room with a thick folder. I tapped into the old networks, Ray said. Marcus thinks he's a genius. He's been running a shadow life for 18 months. Ray slid a surveillance photograph across the wood. Marcus was in a rooftop lounge, laughing intimately, with a stunning woman in a red dress. Diane Castillo, Ray stated flatly. Married to Daniel Mercer, a senior partner at a massive commercial real estate law firm in Midtown. Mercer has deep pockets and a notoriously short temper. Simone walked into the dining room, freezing as she saw the photograph. I kept thinking I was making it up, she whispered. That's not even the worst part, Ray continued. He handed me preliminary divorce consultation records. Marcus was actively planning his exit, moving money into offshore shell accounts. Then came the sentence that nearly made me tear the table apart. Simone picked up a bank statement, her eyes filling with tears. Dad, he emptied Gracie's education fund. He told me I needed to sign digital transfers for a tax audit. I just signed them. I sat back heavily. I started that fund the week Simone graduated. Every time I crawled under a filthy house to repair a foundation, every extra dollar went into that account to ensure my granddaughter's future was her own. And Marcus had drained it to pay for luxury hotel rooms with another man's wife. The operator inside me fully awoke. "Ray," I said, "we don't just want him broke. We want him destroyed. Socially, financially, professionally." Ray smiled grimly. "I already made a call. We're meeting Patricia Navarro at 3 o'clock. Patricia Navarro was a shark in a tailored suit, a high-powered family law attorney who owed me her brother's life from a botched hostage extraction in Bogota back in 2004. She walked into my living room precisely at 3 p.m. For 2 solid hours, she cross-referenced the bank transfers, text screenshots, and corporate expense reports. This is financial abuse, fraudulent misrepresentation, and potential federal wire fraud," Patricia said sharply. "To put it simply, I am going to gut him like a fish." Simone swallowed hard. What if he fights for full custody just to punish me? Patricia leaned forward, her tone softening. "Family courts despise men who steal from their own children. I have the paper trail proving he drained his daughter's college fund. If he attempts to fight for custody, I will personally ensure he walks out in handcuffs." Over the next week, Simone opened a secure checking account and changed her passwords. Marcus, deprived of control, resorted to an escalating barrage of vicious text messages. I read them with cold, terrifying patience. Total, inescapable destruction takes time. That evening, Patricia arrived with the final pieces of the trap. "We have the forged corporate expense reports, the lease for the private apartment he rented for his mistress, and the digital footprint proving he billed his company for weekend trips." Ray tapped the folder. "I have an encrypted line into Marcus's corporate compliance board. If we drop this, they won't just fire him, they'll pursue criminal charges." "And Daniel Mercer," Patricia smiled, "if he finds out his wife has been sleeping with a mid-level VP in a hotel room paid for by stolen corporate funds, he will make it his personal mission to destroy Marcus's life." Patricia looked over at Simone. "The trap is set. Are you finally ready to stop protecting him?" Simone stared at the evidence of her husband's betrayal. She exhaled deeply, looked Patricia dead in the eye, and nodded once. "Burn him to the ground." 3 weeks later, the trap finally sprang. Marcus Hale walked into the grand ballroom of the Houston Children's Foundation Gala at the Marriott Marquis like a man who believed the world owed him a throne. That was the tragic, almost comical piece of his existence. Despite the impending doom actively surrounding him, he still thought he was the smartest person in the room. I kept my appearance simple that evening. No medals, no department pins, no sign of my past life. I wore a dark blazer, gray slacks, and the old silver watch Rhonda had given me for our 25th anniversary. To the wealthy Houston elite sipping champagne under the crystal chandeliers, I probably looked like somebody's retired uncle who had tagged along just for the free salmon. Perfect. That was exactly what I wanted. Ray stood near the back bar, sipping club soda and checking his watch, looking like a bored businessman waiting on a delayed flight. Patricia Navarro moved through the dense crowd the way she moved through everything quietly, efficiently, possessing the terrifying calm of an apex predator who was already 5 moves ahead. Marcus arrived around 7:30 p.m., wearing a custom charcoal suit with a silk pocket square. He possessed the frantic energy of a man auditioning for a version of himself that he believed was still possible. He was giving firm handshakes, flashing wide, practiced smiles, and projecting a booming laugh that you could hear from across the ballroom. Diane Castillo walked closely beside him, draped in a stunning silver backless dress. People noticed. Most pretended not to, whispering behind their cocktail glasses. That is the nature of Houston high society. Everyone sees everything, but nobody says a single word out loud until there is blood in the water. I watched Marcus work the room from a distance. At one point, he was speaking so loudly I could hear his arrogance from 40 feet away. "Big promotion coming through next quarter," Marcus bragged to a group of senior executives, swirling his bourbon. They finally recognized what I bring to the table. Ray materialized silently beside me. "That man could drown in 2 feet of water and still think he invented swimming," Ray muttered. Around 8 o'clock, Marcus finally spotted me standing near the ice sculpture. His expression immediately shifted to pure, unadulterated annoyance. It was the look of a man who had just found muddy footprints on his freshly cleaned white carpet. He excused himself and strode directly toward me, the bourbon glass tight in his hand. Diane Castillo trailed behind him, looking nervously at the exit. "I didn't expect to see you here, Gerald," Marcus sneered, looking me up and down with obvious contempt. "Did they need someone to fix the air conditioning in the kitchen? Or did you just wander in off the street for a free meal?" I took a slow sip of my iced water. "How's the Katy traffic treating you these days, Marcus?" The calmness in my voice irritated him instantly. He leaned in closer, his jaw tight, trying to physically dominate the space, pitching his voice so the nearby guests could hear. "Simone is going through a really difficult, hysterical period right now. You know that, right?" he said loudly. "She's unstable. I'm doing everything I can to save my family from her erratic behavior." I looked him directly in the eye, dropping my handyman facade completely. I let him see the cold, dead-eyed operator underneath. "My daughter is doing better than she has in years," I said softly, my voice cutting through the ambient noise like a scalpel. His confident smirk faltered. For exactly half a second, genuine uncertainty flickered behind his eyes. Then the arrogant mask slid back into place. "Well, we all find our comfort stories, old man." He turned and walked away, but I noticed him glance nervously back over his shoulder, twice. By 8:30 p.m., the atmosphere in the ballroom began to shift. Corporate executives, who had been warmly patting Marcus on the back earlier, were now aggressively avoiding his eye contact. Diane kept scanning the room, radiating a panicked frequency. Marcus was drinking his bourbon faster and talking louder, desperately trying to hold the center of every conversation. Then, the heavy oak doors of the ballroom swung open. Daniel Mercer walked in. He was a tall, powerfully built man in his mid-40s. Controlled fury was written into every rigid line of his posture. He didn't look at the crowd. He walked with terrifying purpose directly toward his wife. There was no shouting, no public scene, just 4 words, delivered in a low, final tone. "We need to leave." Diane went paper white instantly. She dropped her clutch purse. It hit the marble floor with a heavy thud. Marcus, misjudging the situation entirely, stepped forward with his practiced diplomatic smile. "Daniel, good to see you. Listen, this isn't the..." Mercer turned his head and looked at Marcus with a level of absolute, undisguised disgust that stopped Marcus dead in his tracks. "6 months of luxury hotel rooms that your company paid for," Mercer said, his voice dropping an octave. "I know everything. I have the receipts. I think right here works just fine for this conversation." The nearby conversations stopped completely. People pretended not to stare while staring harder than they ever have in their lives. Before Marcus could even process the magnitude of the detonation, 2 men in sharp, dark suits entered through a side entrance. Federal auditors, or high-level corporate investigators. Right on schedule, one of them approached Marcus, pulling a badge from his breast pocket. "Mr. Hale," the investigator said firmly, "we are with internal compliance. We need a private word with you immediately regarding significant irregularities in your expense accounts and unauthorized wire transfers." Marcus laughed. It was a loud, frantic, desperate sound. "About what, exactly?" "There must be a misunderstanding. I'm a vice president." His voice cracked on the last word. People nearby suddenly became very interested in their dessert plates, stepping physically away from Marcus, as if his corruption were contagious. Marcus looked wildly around the massive ballroom, frantically searching for the control that no longer existed. Then, he saw her, Simone. She had just entered through the main doors, walking shoulder to shoulder with Patricia Navarro. Simone was wearing a simple navy blue dress, her hair pulled back sharply. There was no apology in her posture. There was no fear in her eyes. There was only absolute, undeniable presence. The moment Marcus registered her expression, calm, grounded, entirely done, I watched the arrogance behind his eyes shatter into pure panic. He realized, in a single terrifying flash, that his victim had become his executioner. He pushed past the investigators and stumbled toward her. Simone, he pleaded, his voice climbing higher, echoing across the silent room. Simone, tell them this is a mistake. This has been completely blown out of proportion. You know me. Everyone in the ballroom could hear the desperation in his voice, and he could not stop it. His perfect surface was cracking too fast. Simone stood completely still. She didn't flinch. She waited for his frantic babbling to stop. Then she spoke. I stayed silent for 8 years. Marcus. The ballroom went deathly quiet. Her voice didn't shake. It carried across that massive room the way a calm, steady voice always carries further than a loud, desperate one. I was protecting you, she continued, letting the words land like heavy stones. And I am done doing that. Simple, brutal, final. It was the sentence that ended nearly a decade of carefully maintained silence, spoken directly in front of every wealthy executive he had used as social currency. Marcus slowly turned his head and looked at me. He looked at the pathetic handyman standing quietly by the bar. The realization hit him like a physical blow. The public records, the GPS tracking, the internal corporate leaks, the perfectly timed arrival of Daniel Mercer. It wasn't a coincidence. It was a highly coordinated tactical strike. He looked at me with wild desperation. I just looked back at him. My face was completely blank. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just watched him drown. As hotel security escorted a trembling, ruined Marcus Hale toward the service exit, he kept looking back over his shoulder. But I was not looking at her. He looked like the room owed him something, like this nightmare was happening to him rather than because of him. But his lies had simply run out of places to hide. The legal process moved much slower than televisions prepares anyone for. Fraud investigations, internal audits, and divorce proceedings grind through institutions at a maddening pace. But they do grind. Marcus was quietly terminated from his company the following morning, stripped of his bonuses to repay the stolen funds. The divorce took the better part of a year, but Patricia Navarro dismantled him in court with surgical precision. About 4 months after the gala, I was standing barefoot in my kitchen on a bright Saturday morning, flipping blueberry pancakes. Gracie appeared at the counter, explaining with intense authority that dolphins have a much higher emotional maturity than sharks. Sharks, she informed me, stealing a chocolate chip, just bite things without even thinking about it. Dolphins consider their feelings first. I didn't argue with her. Saturday mornings had become our standing arrangement. Cartoons playing quietly, coffee brewing, and Gracie stealing chocolate chips when she thought I wasn't looking. Simone walked into the kitchen, wearing sweatpants and one of my old military hoodies. There was color in her cheeks that morning. Real, vibrant color. Therapy okay this week? I asked carefully. She nodded, staring out the window at the morning sun. It's hard, she said softly. But it's a different kind of hard. Leaving isn't the finish line. Sometimes it's just the starting line, where the real repair work finally gets permission to begin. I rebuilt Gracie's education account between the recovered settlement funds. Patricia secured and careful restructuring. Gracie's future stopped feeling stolen. It was safe again. Later that afternoon, Gracie was riding her pink bicycle crookedly down my driveway while Simone jogged alongside her, laughing loudly. They made it to the end of the driveway and back twice before Gracie finally held her balance entirely on her own. I sat on the porch, holding an unread book, just watching them. It was actual peace, not the tense silence that merely covers up pain. It was real, beautifully ordinary peace. This entire ordeal taught me something I didn't know I still needed to learn at 65 years old. Showing up when the distress code is sent is not enough. Showing up earlier is the whole job. The mistake people make is believing that respecting someone's privacy is the exact same thing as protecting them. It isn't. Sometimes, love means asking the uncomfortable question long before it becomes the impossible one. The question I want you to sit with today is this. Is there someone in your life right now who seems to be making themselves smaller? Someone whose voice is getting quieter, whose visits are getting shorter, and whose apologies are getting longer? Don't file it away. Ask. Marcus called me exactly one more time, near the end of that summer. It was a blocked number. He sounded incredibly small, worn down in a way that had absolutely nothing theatrical left in it. Gerald, he rasped, Can I speak to Simone? No, I said flatly. A long, heavy silence stretched across the line. Then he whispered, I really did love her, you know. I think you probably did, I told him, my voice devoid of emotion. Monsters like Marcus always believe that love is a valid legal defense for abuse. It isn't. You still destroyed her, I said. Then I hung up. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel satisfaction. Either. It was just the quiet click of a door, permanently closing on something that should have ended years before it actually did. That night, after Simone and Gracie were asleep, I sat alone on the back porch with my last cup of black coffee. I listened to the crickets and the distant sound of a radio playing across the marina. A cool breeze finally rolled off the bay. It was the earned kind of quiet. If this story stayed with you, I want to hear from you down in the comments. Drop a 1 if you think I was right to kick that door open without waiting for the police to arrive. Drop a 2 if you think I should have confronted Marcus years earlier when he mocked me at Thanksgiving. Drop a 3 if Simone's final words at that gala calm, certain and unyielding are the moment you'll carry with you the longest. Tell me where, in the world, you're watching from, and what time it is there right now. Knowing that this channel reaches people across the globe is a constant reminder of why sharing these stories matters so much. If you've ever filed something away because confronting it felt like overstepping, you already know exactly what that 4:00 a.m. guilt feels like. You are not alone in that feeling. If this story meant something to you, please hit that subscribe button. We put up new stories every single week. Stay strong, protect your own. I'll see you in the next one. This is a fictional story, inspired by real emotional experiences, fully rewritten and reimagined to create original content. Any resemblance to real people or events is entirely coincidental.